As it says on the slide, my job here is to write books, and I've recently finished a book called The Discipline of Art. And in that book, I am writing about the definition of art, which is going to come up today in this talk, and the role and value of art in society. And when I say art, I am specifically talking about contemporary art practice. That's because I am a practicing artist myself, and I'm writing from that point of view. I don't speak on behalf of all the other disciplines, but there might be related subject areas. But I'm not speaking on behalf of you. If we've got a common ground, then superb. And this talk is actually from a chapter that has been published, or is about to be published, it's impossible to tell, on a book about censorship historically and in the contemporary art world from different angles, published by IB Taurus, or to be published by IB Taurus momentarily. It was actually written a long time ago, and I had to keep updating it, but anyway, because censorship, I've been concerned with issues of censorship and neoliberalism, which is what I'm going to come to in a minute, for a long time now, and I wanted to write this essay, which came out of a talk that I gave for the Association of Art Historians conference in 2013, so ages ago now, because I sensed a growing censorship in the London art world. Now, the other thing, other than only talking about art, because I'm an artist, I only really talk about London. I know we're in the hinterlands of London, but I only talk about London because I only talk about areas that I know. And I have worked for the last 9 years with anthropologists at the University of Cambridge, and they taught me something very important, which is not at all part of the discipline of art history. And the thing that they taught me that I believe is important, that I've taken on as a lesson, is that things happen differently in different locations. That sounds really obvious, but neoliberalism happens different in different locations. It is different in London than it is in New York than it is in Singapore, even though neoliberalism happens in all of those places. Equally, empire, the British Empire, did not happen exactly the same all over the place. It happened in many different locations, but the power, there was a common theme of power relations and abuses, but what actually happened on the ground was very different in the different locations. So I am very sensitive to that, the difference in context and the difference in location. So I only speak on behalf of art in London, because I have lived in London since '91, so I believe I understand what's going on there. Now, this is not to say that censorship isn't happening everywhere else, but I'm saying I think that my research is rigorous because I know it, because it's not just cherry-picking examples from across the globe. I know it's happening in a context, and I understand that context. All right. As I say, that's not how art history is done ordinarily, but that's how I write myself because of learning from the discipline of anthropology. So my opening slide, does anybody recognise either of these names? Grayson Perry? Most people. Tanya Bruguera? The art people. The reason why I've got these two artists up as examples of the London contemporary art world is because when I say that there has been censorship, there is growing censorship in the London contemporary art world, people say, what are you talking about? It's never been so broad, it's never been so diverse. We have guys wearing frocks who make pottery as artists. That was quite a it was understood to be revolutionary that we had pots of very traditional shapes and very traditional, say, iconography, drawing styles on it, actually embraced in the art world as art, kind of radical. We also have protest as art and socially engaged practice as art. So when I say that there is growing censorship, people will point to the wide range of artistic occurrences and types and styles that are happening in the art world. I'm not denying that there is this diversity, but I'm saying something very insidious is happening and we need to be alert. And we need to be alert because, well, I talk a lot about the relationship between art and democracy in my book, and that's a different lecture. But we need to be alert to what's going on. If we care about democracy, if we don't, let it happen. Okay, so in this article, I talk about the difference between censorship and self-censorship, again, just to focus our minds about what's going on, but also to to look carefully at the mechanisms and what's new and what's old. So censorship, we know from history, is the traditional either shutting down of exhibitions, withdrawing of resources that you know to be going somewhere, that the funder knows will be going to somewhere subversive, or covering up artworks on public display. And traditionally, the state has done that, and we hopefully all know examples of the state censorship. Famously, the Soviet Union was an enormous example of that. But also prior to that act, I can't remember, the Indecent Images Act, whatever, in the 1970s, we also had censorship here in this country predominantly around sexual imagery, rather than political opinions, but nevertheless censorship was very foregrounded in this country as well, up until that act, which I can't remember, 70s, early 70s. Yeah, okay. So the state is a famous censoring actor, and I'm told in China today, very much so. The church, I've got the church here, but that could be any other religious organisation censoring, not to the party line, censoring for reasons that are deemed irreligious or blasphemous or whatever. That's a traditional role that the church has taken. And in different places at different times, things are just, the authorities decide what is actually blasphemy, what is transgressed, what should be censored, and whether it should be censored. So that's all very traditional. Individual patrons as well is a traditional route for censorship. Famously in the 1930s, I think it was Rockefeller, that hugely rich American guy, censored the revolutionary communist Diego Rivera, who was married to Frida Kahlo, if you haven't heard of him, censored a big mural. So that's, that kind of thing happens, and it continues to happen today, where a rich person decides to withdraw funding or plaster over or whatever. Now, what's slightly new is the role of corporations, and that's partly because corporations didn't used to actually have anything to do with the art world. And there's a fabulous book if you're interested in neoliberalism and the corporate takeover of the arts and culture, by somebody called Chin Tao Wu. So Chin Tao Wu has written a book called Corporate Interventions into Art, and she's taken a number of examples. It's very thick, it's really meticulous, and if you're sceptical about anything I'm saying, find her book. It's very well evidenced. She's a very rigorous scholar. So Chin Tao Wu talks about the rise of corporates in the art world, in culture generally. She's actually very interested in fashion. That's her first love, but also now, the museums and galleries. And the increasing role that corporations play in paying for art and the ability, therefore, to censor art. And there are numerous examples in this chapter of corporations either trying to censor successfully or unsuccessfully, but I'm not necessarily going into that in this talk because I want us to get to really think about certain points. In addition, we have self-censorship. Now, institutional self-censorship can be when an organisation, a gallery, a university decides not to print something, not to put an exhibition on, or to withdraw resources from a particular person or position because they're afraid of offending whoever it is. So institutional self-censorship, that has been going on for a long time, and it seems to be happening differently now, but that's the fear of offending the people with the money that institutions will self-censor. And that, as I say, that has been going on in my research, as far as I know, at least well into the beginning of the 20th century, maybe earlier. What I'm going to argue is really new and really problematic is individual artists self-censoring. It is one thing for a corporation or for an institution, a gallery, a museum, whatever, to self-censor because they are looking at the long term and thinking, I'm going to just not say this now, or I'm not going to put that artist on, or I'm not going to publish that work, because what I have to do is so much more important that I exist, and so I'm going to just overlook this particular moment of standing up for the rights of people to talk, to have the long game, a view of the long game. I've got a quote by an anthropologist, Matty Bunzel, actually, on this. So Matty Bunzel did a ethnography of the Institute of Contemporary Art in Chicago just quite recently, so an ethnography means to work in a group of people, and it's called participant observation. So you kind of are there on the ground and you watch what people are doing and you listen to what they're saying and what they're not saying, because any group of people have a whole load of myths that keep that group a unit. All of us do it all the time in any group, in any culture. And an ethnographer, being an outsider, comes in and can hear the areas that people are talking about, maybe excessively, maybe weirdly, or not talking about, really importantly, not talking about. The reason why I say that, I love anthropology. I'm not an anthropologist, but I love them and I really respect what they're doing. And I will note that the only academic published in national newspapers to see what was happening with the financial crisis of 2008, or 10 years ago, was an ethnographer, because she could see what the financial world were not talking about. And she was like, well, that's weird. Let's go and look at what they're not talking about. And she could see that there was a crisis on the way. So it's a very valuable method for exposing the unspoken. Anyway, so Matty Bunzel goes into the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and one of his conclusions is this: the task of the curator continues to evolve. Importantly, he's not judgmental. I am, but he's not. He's an ethnographer. The task of the curator continues to evolve. No longer centred on the quest for new, challenging and difficult, it has become a position of managerial mediation. Success in this context comes from the ability to domesticate contemporary art, kind of to neuter contemporary art in ways that make it amenable to maximum audience engagement and donor sponsorship involvement. The curator of the moment, in other words, is someone who can readily execute populist shows, populist meaning lots of people want to go to it, nothing difficult, nothing challenging, without losing conceptual credibility, reconcile institution and market without seeming a sellout, and build exhibitions around a patron's collection without being too obvious about it. That was his conclusion of what was going on at the moment in the Institute of Contemporary Art in Chicago. That is no different from what's happening anywhere else. Globalisation. Anyway, he's the only person I will quote who is talking about London. The individual artist self-censoring, I'm distinguishing between possibly the justification for an institution to self-censor and artists, and that's what this talk is about. Right, so here we get to the big words. So neoliberalism is defined by lots of people in lots of different ways, but for me it concisely comes down to this one, this sentence: the belief that the market is the best and most efficient way of delivering all the goods that society and an individual needs. So in the past, just to contrast that with what used to happen, in the past, in the 20th century, in this country, the state provided lots of what were called public goods. So the state provided, say, health, education, roads, telecommunications, sewerage, water, parks, art. There was funding for the arts from the end of World War II to this moment. There was funding for the arts that was arm's length, not part of the government, arm's length funding for the arts, because art was considered a public good. I won't go to the history of public goods, but we can, if you've got questions, we can talk about that later. And what changed? Oh, okay. And so another model of public goods is, say, a rich donor, a rich benefactor, a philanthropist providing, say, immunisation for Africa or food for this particular parish. The church also provided public goods. So there's been other models. But what neoliberalism believes is that the best and most efficient form of providing absolutely everything, sewerage, communications, roads, transport, health, education. What neoliberalism understands is that the best, most effective way of providing this for individuals and society is the market. That's the position that a neoliberal is coming from. Now, a lot of we don't have to have a discussion, but who agrees in this room with that bold statement? Okay, so there's a few people who are neoliberal. That's what I was meaning. Are neoliberal in this room. That's cool. I'm not going to argue against that, but I'm not. But I can see that marketisation has improved some things and definitely been to the detriment of other things. So I'm not just anti-neoliberalism. What I am definitely aware of and conscious of, and want you to be conscious of, is the internalisation of neoliberal values. This is our individual responsibility within a system that is neoliberal. Just because governments have decided to open prison provision to the public, to the market, and have private providers for that, or just because the government may want to sell off the NHS or provide roads through tolls or whatever, just because they're doing that doesn't mean we have to believe in the market ourselves as individuals. But there has been a growing tendency for individuals just to slide into neoliberal thinking, even when they're opposed to it politically. And what I mean by that, in specific, is market measures of excellence and value. So the market measures excellence in two ways. Either loads of people buy it, could be shit, doesn't matter. As long as loads of people buy it, then it's an excellent product. If nobody buys it, it's a shit product. That's neoliberal thinking. That's a market mechanism for understanding value. So we can see how that overlays onto populism. If loads of people like it, then it's got to be good. If only a few people like it, well, there's something wrong with the people, or there's something wrong with the thing. The other way that the market values things are if rich people buy it, so it has a high price tag. So that's the two values that the market has for everything. That there is a high price tag, so if something has a high price tag, it must be good, surely. If you pay a lot of money for it, it must be better, higher quality than something you're not paying very much for. That's a market way of thinking. And for me, the hilarious example that happens in the art world is, as you may or may not know, women artists tend to be valued in the market at 10%, 1/10 the rate of men in any equivalent market. So Tracy Emin goes for 10% the prices that Damien Hirst goes for, or Barbara Hepworth goes for 10% the prices that Henry Moore goes for. We expect that, don't we, girls? So that's how it's always been. Now, the hilarious thing happened with Natalia Goncharova, which you may have heard of. Natalia Goncharova? Yeah. So she's a Russian Soviet modernist. Nobody had heard of her. She had no value in the market until Russia had a lot of money quite recently, in the last 20 years, and now has an art market. Now, Natalia Goncharova's work is very, very valuable. She is second to Frida Kahlo in the Women's League. Now, is her work that much better now that the Russians are buying it? Or was it always good and undervalued, and always good and overvalued? I don't know. But I'm saying that price tag and value are not necessarily correlated. But we have internalised in society a credulity towards market values. We assume that if it's popular, it's good, and if it has a high price tag, it's good. And we have forgotten to think, are there any other qualities or values of excellence beyond what the market is determining? So another argument that I make is that in the art world, so there may be lots of reasons why this is happening in other parts of society, but in the art world, the reason why we have allowed in the myth that what is good is popular, or what is good has a high price tag, and that's the only way to judge it, is because we've given up on other really important, I'm not saying it's good to have these other narratives, but we've kind of left ourselves in a vacuum. So there used to be, Romanticism is a 19th century movement across the arts. And it is the origins, in a sense, of the myth of genius. Now, genius did slightly pre-exist the Romantic era in a form, but not in the widely accepted form that we know what genius is. So anybody want to tell me what a genius is? What are the qualities of genius, please? Yeah?
Someone who is remarkably intelligent and or creative.
Okay, remarkably. Any measure on how do we get to the remarkably? No,
Me.
Yeah. Just to continue, I'll also ask the governor in a minute, but...
Well, semantics really, but I guess someone who, if you wanted to do it mathematically, say in the top percentile, or like has an above average IQ score, or not above average, like a really excellent, something like that.
Really, yeah. So let's say the top 1%.
You're going to quantify it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that seems like a reasonable measure.
I would use the word singularity.
Singularity, that they are singular. Okay.
I think I like that point of the singular, but I also think that the individual is unique. In their own way, they see a unique perspective, they feel a unique perspective, they want to do something else that no one has done before.
Okay, so a genius is unique and is not afraid to pursue their singular vision.
Yeah.
And
I think there's lots of definitions, but my favourite is the one from Thomas Aquinas, who says an angel puts it in your pineal gland in your brain, and that's why you can do wonderful things in art without ever seeing them. It's already inside. So 3 cheers for Thomas Aquinas.
So a particular angel is sitting on... Okay, so these, I like these definitions of genius. You probably all have them in your head. Now, in general, who is a genius? Give me a stereotypical genius. Who is
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking, another stereotypical genius. Da Vinci, yeah. He's usually the one that comes. Any other stereotypical geniuses? Einstein.
The woman that modernized modern medicine, what was her name again?
I didn't know there was a woman who modernized modern medicine.
I forgot her name. Really sorry about that.
No, but thank you for bringing in women, because in general, and ever since the 1970s, there's been lots of writing about genius. The shape of a genius is the shape of a white European or European-derived male person, man. So there's been lots and lots of post-colonial critique about the notion of genius. Post-colonial meaning people looking at the whiteness of genius, and lots and lots of critique looking at the gender of genius. So these are important things to have in your mind. And since basically the 1970s, 1980s, since the idea of genius, romantic genius, has been made slightly suspect because it's really just maintaining white male supremacy, a lot of people have gone, okay, there's no such thing as genius, we're all the same. We're all assuming we're all the same. So that's the first thing that's happened. And in the art world, there's a lot of people who peddle that idea that we're actually all the same, everybody's an artist. And that was a great aspect also anyway. I could go into the subtleties of romanticism there, but I'm just going to do this version. The other thing that has been debunked since the 1980s is the idea of the avant-garde. So the avant-garde, who is an avant-garde artist? So that's what it means it actually means leading from the front, and it's a military term, but ahead of the curve. So name a quintessential avant-garde artist. Previously, historically, Picasso is your quintessential avant-garde artist. Exactly. Usually it would be, somebody would say Picasso, they might say, in the field of music, they might say, what's his name? Stockhausen?
Yes.
I was thinking of the atonal guy. Anyway,
John
Cage. John Cage. There's somebody else, but anyway. Poetry guy, or James Joyce, not poetry. Anyway, these are the avant-garde artists, the people who are at the cutting edge of culture, leading from the front. With postmodernism, or with critique that's happened since the 80s, 90s, 2000s onwards, we look at this and we say, funny, very similar people to the romantic myth of the white male genius, leading culture from the front. And anyway, where is the front of culture? There is no front of culture. We are all embodying culture at any one time. So we in the art world, we in culture, have lost two really important myths that sustained us when we were poor and disliked by the majority of people, when what we were doing was misunderstood and not appreciated by our mums, let alone by our neighbours. So these are really important myths that we no longer have, because we now look at the myths and we are much more critical about them, saying, who are they privileging, who are they excluding? But does that mean everybody is an artist, and does that mean all things are of value? No, we don't think that, because we've let the market tell us what has value. The market tells us what has value is the popular or the high-priced. And that's because we've forgotten our own endogenous values. Endogenous meaning coming from within our own discipline. That's a word I've learned from the anthropologists. So that's a really important point that I want you to bear in mind, because I think this is how we, as artists and as humans, navigate a world which is set up, I think, not working for our favour, working towards plutocracy, where the rich rule, working against democracy, where we rule the people. Anyway, that's in my book, and also in another talk. So let's talk about corporate censorship, which is why we're here today. In corporate censorship, I want to also distinguish between actual censorship and actual corporate censorship, and two things that happen anyway, which lots of artists and protesters have confused for censorship in the past. And it's really important to tease these things out, because if we are concerned with censorship, we need to attack the right instances of censorship. So there are two theories that I want to look at, which talk about mechanisms which some people mistake for censorship. The first one is the operation of the market. Okay, so I've got your two reference points if you ever want to look this up. Jean Gadry and Michel Calon. They're both French. So they argue, among others, and their argument, in particular Jean Gadry, who is an economist but pro-market, so he's not like anti-markets, he's not anti-capitalism, but he thinks that capitalism can only work with certain provisos, and he's definitely not neoliberal. So Jean Gadry, he has observed, made the observation, and writes about how markets necessarily reduce competition. Now, you might hear from the people who support neoliberalism that markets are the only way to provide everything for everybody. But what they also do, by necessity, is reduce competition in order to create a market. That's how markets work. And the easiest way to explain this, if you're not already thinking about markets and economies, is, for instance, if we are going to say who is the fastest person on Earth, you have to decide over what length, and then everybody has to race over that length. Because the fastest person on Earth could be completely different unless you determine exactly what that market is. Is it 100 metres? Is it 1 metre? Is it around the world? What does it mean to be the fastest person on Earth? You need everybody racing in the same terms. In the market, if everything's being valued, things have to have similar terms, and things that are different get sliced off and left out of the market. That is how markets operate. This is not controversial, it's just controversial to people who don't understand this. So, for instance, Michel Calon, who is a sociologist of technology, and there's lots of comparisons between sociologies of technology and sociologies of art and culture, he describes how, for example, inferior technologies get taken on as normal because of how markets get behind a particular product, even if they're inferior. And that can be because of the domination of a particular player. So a classic example for him is QWERTY keyboards, our keyboards. There is no reason to have a QWERTY keyboard. What happened is the old manufacturer, dominant manufacturer of those typewriters back in the day, produced them, came to dominate the market, and then everybody had to learn how to type in QWERTY, and then every typewriter became reproduced in QWERTY. It is not a superior product. It is just what came to dominate because of market operations. So these two people are interestingly for me, arguing about the limitations of the market. Even if you're pro-market, it has limits. So, for examples, there has been writers protesting about the way that Amazon has dropped what's called mid-list authors. So there are people who are trying to write literature, as distinct from bestsellers. Okay, so there's not a lot of people reading it, like not millions, but tens of thousands. And Amazon is dropping them. And all of the authors got together and we're having a campaign, censorship, this is censorship. It's not censorship, it's how the market operates. It will reward the popular and it will take away resources from the unpopular. Now, in the case of Jean Gadry, as I said, he is pro-markets, but he says that with a massive proviso, which is that we need more than one system. To have true diversity of the arts, of science, of culture, of everything, you need diverse systems of support. So he's pro-markets, but he's also pro-academia, pro-state, all at the same time. Not one, he argues, is going to encourage diversity because they are all going to be monopolistic. Now, I think the state can, but that's politics. All right, so the next point of what looks like censorship but isn't is the art world. And here we get to the institutional definition of art. Now, the two guys, this was written about in the 1960s by George Dickey and Arthur Danto, two separate people, and they disagree. But anyway, they're philosophers. The institutional definition of art so these are analytic philosophers, and what analytic philosophers do, spend their lives doing, is trying to describe the essence of whatever it is. It could be the essence of reality. What is reality? What is this chair? Or what is art? How do we define art? And for centuries it was defined as beauty. And then that was understood to no longer be true in the 20th century because a lot of ugly, unaesthetic art was art and valued as art. And so it was understood that maybe there's not the same as beauty. Some people decided to define it through materials. So it's got to be oil paint. It's got to be marble, things produced in marble. Obviously, art's not produced that way. Art's produced in lots of ways. For Arthur Danto, he had to rethink his entire philosophy when he saw for the first time in 1964, I think, Andy Warhol's Brillo boxes. And he went, how are these art and the greengrocer's Brillo boxes not art? What? It must be because there's a philosophy around Andy Warhol's boxes and not greengrocer's ones. He, of course, being a philosopher, put himself central to this. But so it was that there has to be a philosophy of art for art to exist. Art does not exist unless there are people thinking and theorising about art as art. Otherwise, it's something else being done. It's not less valuable, it's just not art. So that's what Arthur Danto said. Now, Dickey, who I prefer, took this a bit further and he said, what makes things art is that there is a consensus among people who are rightly placed to call something art. So in other words, it takes the art world to make art. It's a group of people who make art, who define what is art and what isn't art. How, I can't remember his name. Martin Creed's Blue Tack. There's an artwork, Blue Tack, with his thumbprint on it. That's artwork. Whereas the technician who put up the label with his thumbprints next to it, that was art. So you need an art world to make something art and something not art. So that's George Dickey. And I 100% agree with him. I think that's how you define art. But unlike George Dickey, because I am more widely read than him, in the sense I'm not a philosopher, but I read different things from him, I understand via Bruno Latour that this is how all disciplines work. All disciplinary knowledge works this way. There is no difference between art and science in this sense. It is a consensus of experts in a field defining what is science, what is art, what is quality, what is not quality, who is a scientist, who isn't a scientist, who is an artist, who isn't an artist. All disciplines operate like that. This is, for me, fundamentally important. It is taking, this understanding takes it beyond what Dickey and any philosopher, no philosophers turned up, would say. This is a very practitioner point of view, but for me it's very evident through Latour and taking beyond Dickey, that it is us who produce the knowledge, and we must be self-conscious about this. Who are we excluding? What do we count? If everybody's an artist, what is the point? How do you know whether you've done something worthwhile or good unless we decide for ourselves what it is? Now, I'm coming to the end because I know it's very hot and some people are just yawning. So I'm going to corporate censorship, because I've just given you something that I argue for a lot, which is as artists and as people in higher education, that we are responsible for our disciplines, the disciplines in which we operate. We are responsible for defining what is excellent and what isn't part of it. That is part of our role. Now, in that, what happens when artists self-censor? What happens when artists, in hoping to get a commission, in hoping to not offend a sponsorship body, trying to get into the Biennale circuit, trying to get into this gallery, so they start tweaking what they're doing in order to achieve that end? What happens to our role as artists when we start self-censoring? When we start acting as if we're corporations or professional in a very negative sense. I'm all for professionalism, but the professionalism where it means thinking about the market first and not our endogenous values, the values that come from ourselves. And there has been an upswing of instances of artists self-censoring, and Sophie Hope, her PhD was looking at this, and interestingly, just illustrating how much more artists are ready to self-censor than what we have been in the past, when we were bolstered by the myth of romanticism and genius, publish and be damned because what I've got to say is important. No, we don't do that. Publish because publishing is really important, because I've got a professional career that I have to maintain. Sophie Hope's interviews, she interviewed a whole range of artists, all of whom are political leftist artists. They were too scared, all but one, were too scared to go on the record. So they would only conduct their interviews masked and anonymised because they were afraid of the backlash from the art world. There is a lot at stake when we self-censor. And that's my last slide, so that's where I'll end. Questions? Ian.
Hi there. I'm thinking about the definition of being an artist, and I'm thinking, you're identifying this self-censoring as an artist somehow not producing what they want to produce, but producing what they feel an external organisation, body. I'm just wondering if what's happening really is that artists are becoming designers. In other words, instead of producing art for themselves, they're producing artefacts for a client, maybe an imaginary or a constructive client, still haven't met.
Yeah, I think that's a really incisive critique of what's going on. Yeah, no, I think that, and maybe and I'm really sorry to all the designers in the room, but I think there's a really massive mistake in putting art and design together because some of the values have been conflated. And it's a historical reason, as you'll know. Coldstream Report is the reason why art and design are together. We used to not be. Art used to be taught in art schools, and design was taught in polys. There's a massive mistake in putting us together. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with design, it's just that it's for something else.
No, I think there's an awful lot wrong with design.
Okay,
Because,
go for it.
I mean, I am, I used to practice design, I teach it, but there's an awful lot wrong with it because even years ago, someone like Victor Pasternak saying that, designers should question, designers should constantly be re-evaluating what they do. And maybe that's happening to a certain degree, but on the other hand, you can't train every designer to do that, otherwise no one would actually design anything that would get done, so there wouldn't be any product. But there's a big question to be asked. Design now needs to question itself, clearly.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot wrong with the design approach to art.
There you go. No, does anybody want to comment on that? Because I'm happy to go that.
Yeah, I'm a designer. My major is in graphic design, and I kind of agree. But on the other hand, you have to produce something. Like you need clients, and those clients will provide you with a brief and the instructions to create a piece for them, for the market, to enhance their product, and that's why they hire you, right? So either you gamble, or do I become this artist that is within me, or do I become the designer that the market requires? So it's like, and my point is, as long as you are conscious of your boundaries, of what you are willing to do or definitely not to do, improve the market, I think you'll be good to go. In my opinion, it's a well thought question to question your career, what you're doing for the market, and what is the reason you're doing it. As long as you question yourself, I think that's really good.
Do you also have a point on this?
Yeah, because I have background both in art and design, and it's not either be an artist or a designer. In design, you can choose your approach. You can design for the people, and that's the point, or you can design for the market. It's just that if you design for the people, there's no one to help you actually produce it. But it's pretty much the same in art, right? Yeah.
Well, no, it depends on the mechanisms of support. That's the point. That's the Michel Calon point. That's my point. We did used to have alternative mechanisms of support. If we only look to the market as a mechanism of support, then there is only one support for design even. There are, if we build a society with alternative support systems to just the market, then a wider range of things can be made. Art, design, whatever.
I think that already exists. I mean, we live in a social era where you don't actually have to put yourself out there to a community. You can just put yourself out there. And if a community does tend to see you, they will not just centralize you, but they will take you further than just that social media or that image that you just produce for presenting yourself. I also think that you can have two mindsets. You can be an artist, and you can also see the perspective of the designer. I also think that you can be a designer and see the perspective of an artist. It's not that hard. I understand that there are techniques in this, and everybody wants something else, but what can you do?
There was somebody else here, because it was Elizabeth, and I saw another hand earlier.
Mine.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
It's a comment that sort of relates in terms of artists needing other sports. I think from my experience doing lots of professional development for artists, which is another result of the market thing, is that artists want some sort of career route. So they're trying to guess who's going to be interested in their work and who's going to buy it and who's going to want to work with them. So then they don't necessarily consciously change the work, but there is a real sense of I'm trying to follow a ladder when there really is no ladder. Because being an artist isn't like that.
It's not like that. It's never been like that. There was a moment in time when this weird, as we all know with the YBAs, there was a particular confluence of influences which meant some people from certain backgrounds in certain colleges got a high amount of visibility and a high amount of money. Those structures don't exist in the same way. There's no ladder.
But artists really want to try and work that out because
they like to imagine. Because they're imagining in the myth of meritocracy, as if the art world is a meritocracy.
Yeah.
The reason why I brought into that example of Natalia Goncharova's changes in prices, it is not a meritocracy.
No.
And, we have to realise that as artists and work out what are we going to do.
Yes, I think that's a more interesting question to put to that whole debate.
Yeah.
There's a risk of two parallel kind of careers. I think that the artists making work that they want to make for themselves for their own development, I think goes parallel versus, as you're talking about, the route they're on to try and get the commissions, get the projects, get the exhibitions, which may well be different to some of the work they're making themselves privately.
Yeah, like I say, for me, well, for lots of reasons, art is an act in public. We are constitutive of the public realm. We are creating the world that we are creating our world as we do it. So when we start self-censoring, we're making self-censorship normal for art. We're also validating neoliberal values. It is a massively important thing that, not that we make art for ourselves as self-expression. I'm not arguing for being a hobbyist. That's what hobby people do. I'm arguing for art as a discipline with the values of excellence that we adhere to, that we define, we adhere to, and we build on. Because that's incredibly important, because by instantiating those values in society. But Stephen, do you want to go next, or the? Yeah.
It's not related. So if somebody else wants.
Okay. Does somebody want to talk about this discussion? Okay.
Sorry, I'm just wondering whether you've got a thing about neoliberalism. Because it seems to me that actually we're social animals.
Yes.
Hang on. Yeah. It seems to me that actually we're social animals. Artists are people, they're person. And as you say, we construct these works, expecting them to be seen. And I'm wondering whether actually censorship, self-censorship, is part of the artistic act itself. You imagine people encountering the artifact or the object or the image. And in fact, aren't you just objecting to a particular set of self-censorship? When actually self-censorship per se is a necessary part of, refining, focusing, promoting. It seems to be part of the actual methodology of creation.
Because I know that you're a composer, so I would say that the act of creation isn't, when you change and refine and hone, that is not the same as censorship or self-censorship. That is about judgments about what works. Artistic. No, oh my God, absolutely not. I can't.
So what about that filtering process?
Yeah, filtering is not censorship. Censorship is that eye on your shoulder saying no bad. And I can't help you to distinguish between censorship and excellence. I can't. You have to search in your heart for that one, because I cannot. I've never put this into words before because nobody's ever asked me that question. But there is miles of difference between those two. They are incompatible, in my view. They are incompatible, nothing to do with each other. Because, of course, the pursuit of excellence is what you do in your studio, and that's what I'm arguing for. And your definition of excellence is going to be socially defined by the art group, by the definition of art. And there is anthropologies, ethnographies of artists working in pre-modern societies where the artists get together and are going for the best, and their market in Shields go, oh, I don't like that. And they say, what do you know? We're the artists. You take what we've, So there are lots and lots of societies, not just modern European societies where artists and what we do are defined by the group known as artists or musicians or whatever. But what is important is that there is a sense of excellence that there is a conversation about. And then it's a pass. So there will be revolutions in what is excellent from one time to another. Censorship is from the outside, where people with different values come in and say, no, this is offensive to me and my money, or me and whoever. No, and you must stop. And self-censorship.
Sensibilities?
No, it's not their sense. I don't know. It's not.
So what about the hostility towards, cubism for the artist?
Well, that's
was
because,
that censorship or not?
No, it's not censorship. That's the discussion within art for a new paradigm. That was the paradigm shift. This happens in science as well. There's a paradigm shift, and it's hard for those artists who are working to change in the new paradigm, because of course they're laughed at, but that happens everywhere. This is how thought progresses, if you want to call it progress, or changes over time. Does anybody else want to talk in this? Because I know there are other. Yes, okay. Woo! Who wants to go first? Barbara or Grace?
So is it only censorship if it compromises excellence?
I'm sure you can censor crap work. Censorship is censorship. Censorship
Or
is...
if it compromises quality, at whatever level it compromises quality. The suggestion here is that if censorship is to do with quality, then it's not censorship.
Yes, I'm still confused about what the difference is between censorship and exercising judgment to not do something that you don't think will be excellent. If there's this internalised,
maybe you've never been censored. I have been. Grace.
You're not answering the question there.
Sorry,
You're
what?
not answering the question there. What is the difference?
I was just struggling because how do I explain that to somebody else? If you can't tell the difference between censorship and the pursuit of excellence, I don't know how to explain that to you. I can't. It's like explaining the colour red to a blind person. I can't explain that. How do I explain that? It is completely different.
excellence is something a group of artists can do.
No, excellence is judged by the group,
Exactly.
but it is your own values within a group consensus.
If you've got this internalised sense of the experience of your work, you're absolutely internally imagining what this group of artists will, how they will respond.
Well, you're in dialogue with your peers, absolutely. You're in. I think you know what. I think what you've done is you've conflated the superego. Okay, so the superego of censorship. This is an ego, not a superego. Right. If we want to use the psychological, and there is a very big difference between enacting the ego, the healthy ego, with all of the balances of the superego, navigating the group and your own needs within the group, the social, the parental, the authoritarian, whatever, and inappropriately listening to the superego, which is the harsh you should not. So I think there's a conflation there in the psychological model. But these are two very separate things.
I suppose I'm thinking of just Kovic. He wrote some music that was censored. He didn't write some music because it will be censored.
Okay, no, Grace, go.
I felt for a moment I was being censored about it. My question's very simple. I just want you to tell us what you think about Banksy, because neoliberalism is his subject. He's responding to the art market, trying to subvert it from within, and he occupies a space between art and design.
Let me just see how many minutes I don't have to talk. Oops, no. All right. So when I write books, I write as an artist, and I write to fellow artists. This is an answer, I promise. And I write to fellow artists, and so I avoid critiquing or criticising other artists, or even praising. I do a little bit, and the art historians get really annoyed at me because it's not how art historians write. The reason why I do that is because is not to do what I'm doing now, which is avoiding the question. But the reason why I do that is because I want artists ourselves to put themselves into that picture of excellence, of defining excellence, and etc. But I do talk about Banksy in This Is Not Art without naming him. And the two lines that I throw away on him is this. I can go into it more, but the two lines that I throw away is an artist who uses avant-garde or political looking methods is deemed to be political, even though he is also racist and sexist. So people are looking at the method of the message and not the message. They're forgiving a lot of what is, not all of it, But there is a lot of racism and sexism that he has produced happily, but because it is stenciling, it's like, oh, that's leftist, that's good, excellent, he's radical. I also think he's reproducing leftist cliches. That said, so that in general, that's what I think, but for my 50th birthday, yay, round of applause, I got this old. I went to Palestine and Israel, and I visited the Banksy Hotel in Palestine, called the Waldorf Hotel. Hilarious. I actually didn't realise that joke until I said it out loud. Anyway, the Waldorf Hotel. And that is a great artwork. And I forgive him, I don't forgive him anything, but that is a great artwork. He's doing something so important there, even though he's still using sexism all the time. He's avoided racism for that one. But so the Waldorf Hotel is a hotel right next to and overlooking the wall, the huge dividing apartheid wall that Israel has put to divide the West Bank and also Gaza, but this is in the West Bank, between Gaza and Israel. And you see Bethlehem, it's in Bethlehem. Bethlehem and Jerusalem almost used to be like touching cities. And then there's this massive wall, and if you're Palestinian or Israeli, you have to take this enormous diversion to get what used to be a kind of 1 mile walk up the road to get between East Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And his hotel is an effective, powerful and important intervention which actually does something new in those politics. So some of his rooms look over at this wall, which is like the wall is twice this ceiling height, like enormous, with these turrets that look like the air traffic control, like at the ends. And there's all the area near the hotel is full of graffiti, like a democratic graffiti board, where I would argue real democracy is happening on that board because there's actually a huge variety of opinions, all being enacted on the Palestinian side. So real democracy is happening. This wall becomes a canvas for discussion. Inside the hotel itself, I've got to say that the Palestinians, or at least the people who live in Bethlehem, love Banksy because people come to Bethlehem now. Christians always used to, obviously, but a wide range of people now come to Bethlehem because of that hotel existing and see this amazing museum that he's put up, which doesn't polarise the debate. It's not anti-Semitic. It's nicely nuanced, with including Israelis who are protesting against the extremes of what's going on in the government and in settlements. Really nicely nuanced museum, which you can see an artist has done because it's nicely done. And the whole. Anyway, I can't tell you. Look on the website; it's really good. So that's my thing about Banksy. I'm deeply ambivalent, but respect for the most amazing thing I've seen in years. Yeah. Sorry, that was massive. Off-piste. Did you want to?
Yeah. I mean, going back to the discussion sort of 10 minutes ago, I want to ask you about Dickey.
About?
Is it Dickey?
Oh yeah, George Dickey. Yeah.
George Dickey. I'm wondering, if you think about the issues with which we've been struggling over the last 15 minutes, whether there's not, is it art, is it not, is it excellent, is it not? Is there a case, do you think, and I'm really interested that, you come from an anthropological background in part, is there a case for kind of taking a kind of wider structure, a structural view of this and saying, well, what's the kind of field on which these questions are played out? And it made me think about my mother-in-law, who who couldn't go to art school because of her age and class, and the money she had at her disposal. She draws like a dream. She goes to adult education classes, and she brings back these beautiful things that are covered with glitter. So she has the exercise of no nothing that many of us might recognise as artistic discrimination. But this is still art.
Is it?
Well, it seems to me, if we were looking from an anthropological perspective, we'd have to take into account that it's got the same name attached to it. It's done in an art school. It is an art class. On the receipt she gets back from the Richmond Council, it says art class number 101 or whatever it says. And it's part of a wider scheme of art. And what we've done is we put structures to make the distinctions between one kind of practice and another. Now, I'm really interested in what happens if those structures become a fluid spectrum.
I write a lot about this because that fluidity is what has been argued as democratic for art, that this is a good thing. I think it's a bad thing. I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's happened in art because there's a mistake, because art has addressed a historical unfairness around class and gender, that only certain people get to make art. And what art did in response was say, all right, that's really true, it's really bad, so everybody is an artist. And that's actually a push from the 19th century. That's actually, Tolstoy was at the head of that from the 19th century. And Ruskin. So that push that everybody's an artist and to democratise, as it's seen, is I would say, the cliche of the art world. I'm arguing absolutely against that. I'm saying no. The reason why that is not a good idea is because while we pretend everybody's an artist, the resources are only going to certain people. So what kind of a lie are we perpetrating? It's just not true. The structures don't support everybody equally. So why are we pretending everybody is equal on this one? So that's the first reason not to. But the second reason is this question of excellence and the relationship between excellence and democracy. So this is the whole other talk. This wasn't in censorship because it's in my book, The Discipline of Art. And my argument for the discipline of art is no different from my argument for disciplinarity and universities in general, in regimes which are trying to undermine what we do and why we do it. So this is not to take away from your individual mother-in-law and what she does.
Do you agree it's culturally instructive?
What?
Do you agree that it's culturally instructive? The reason I ask, I'll tell you what's in
culture.
What?
It's part of material culture.
It's part of material culture. It's part of the drive to so-called creativity, although creativity happens in all sorts of other fields. And I'm not saying it's bad that she does it. I'm not saying that she shouldn't do it. I'm saying it's not art. That's all I'm saying. I'm not elitist in the sense that I'm keeping people out, but I'm saying there is excellence which is an elite, and we need to preserve that, because without that, we lose democracy. Oh my God, that's a really weird thing to say. I know how weird that is, but it is true. Because democracy requires difference to be instantiated, embodied in public. Democracy, what has happened recently, super recently with Trump and arguably other things, is democracy has come to mean popular, the majority. So in the bell curve, what happens in the majority to the people at this end of the bell, these outliers and these outliers? In a populist democracy, I don't know how to do the ocracy of that. Under demagogues, when you're appealing to the mass, you are scapegoating, ignoring, maligning the difference. And we can see how that's happening now. In a liberal democracy, which was theorised well before we ever achieved it, we only achieved liberal democracies in the 20th century, but they were theorised in the 18th and beginning of the 17th century. So there is only a recent new phenomenon, a modern invention, the idea of democracy. But this is my politics, is democracy. And democracy is underpinned by difference. One of the very many differences that exist between us, because we are all different, is expertise. We are not all the same. We do not all know the same. We have different areas of expertise, and some people have devoted their lives to understanding really small things, really arcane things. And a democracy functions when that is as respected as something else. And democracies require all that difference to muddle along uncomfortably, difficultly. What's important? That discussion is what makes democracy. So for me, elites in the sense that of difference, not overly resourced, not exclusive, but difference, democracy is fundamental to that, because without that, we lose democracy. We have totalitarianism and demagogues. There's a much longer argument, and I would, if you would like to read it, but it is fundamental to me. But I know these accusations because they've been around since the 19th century. These are cliches. We have to think differently because we're walking into a very, I call neoliberalism and what's happening in Trump and that kind of politics, it's very totalising. Not totalitarian, but totalising. And there are big dangers to difference, to if you are different, to thinking differently, to being different in those regimes. And universities and the pursuit of excellence is just another way. It's not better, not worse, but it is another way. The pursuit of truth is another way of having endogenous values that are not just market-driven, that are not just coming from the centres of power. Just doing something that has its own values. Not doing it, being it in public, constituting the public realm. This is Hannah Arendt, if you're interested in the political thinker behind this.
I'm very ignorant when it comes to art, so I can't really talk about art in general. I'm not really interested in it, but it seems to me that perhaps you're putting art on a very high level where I don't really think it should be. And I think that's where, of course you are, and I think that's where I totally agree with you that architecture or design shouldn't be nowhere near the arts. And from my background, we're the problem solvers, and we're trying to solve current issues in the world where I don't really, this is where perhaps I'm very ignorant in saying that I don't think art really solves much.
I don't think that's our function. We're not there to solve. As you say, design.
But you are, Natalie, but you're saying it's trying to kind of, it's really important for the democracy of...
Yeah, we have a role, a fundamental role, function in democracy, not to solve things. That's, lots of artists have argued that. Tony Bruguera have argued that. I do not argue that.
So to go back to censorship. But what about the lack of censorship? Is it not helping neoliberalism? I'll give you an example. So, for instance, let's say I'm working on a project which has an anti-capitalist flavor or aftertaste, or it might be quite explicit actually, and I get funding from a foundation that has been founded by a rich entrepreneur that perhaps is dead anyway. And there's no censorship whatsoever, so I can do whatever I want with this money. Is it not helping the foundation to remind us that certain parts of the world is liberal? So is it not helping their profile? I mean, it does, but is it okay?
I kind of don't understand.
So if I get funding, if my project is kind of quite explicitly anti-capitalist, and I receive money from a foundation.
Okay. No, so you're arguing in the co-optation thing. So there's another old saw.
In that case, I wish there was censorship, but if there's no censorship...
No, so really, you're arguing, so there's two old saws that have been around since the 19th century and people peddle, like that guy. One of them is the inclusion of everybody, that's a good thing, and the other one is co-optation, that there's no point in doing anything because it will be co-opted by the evil powers that be, or a neoliberal foundation is funding this, and therefore you shouldn't take the funding, or you shouldn't. That's
I'm
what you're
wondering
asking.
actually, because I want to apply for a PhD.
Okay, I feel very strongly that Marxism, that argument comes from Marxism, and that led us down a dark alley cul-de-sac, where it is a lose-lose situation. because you have to look at the structures that feed you before, and you're trying to find some holy, pure place from which to make work. There is no such thing. We who are coming from a different narrative, not the Marxist polarized narrative, but emergent. So this is Deleuze and Guattari. They are not Marxists. Anything that's rhizomatic or emergent, there is no pure place that you're operating from. You're doing what you're doing, and my argument for why you must do your art, is because you're instantiating something that needs to happen in the world. Because without it, there is a wide range of, there is a narrow range of cultures endlessly replicated that we're all bombarded with all the time. And art does something else. And if you're doing an art that's excellence, it really moves us somewhere else. If you're doing something that, like an amazing artwork, then I am somewhere that I could not have been without that encounter. And that is important, fundamentally important. And those structures, like that's a merry dance, that one. Forget that. Aside from it being old-fashioned Marxism, and so you should forget it for that reason, because it's not true, it's the wrong model to be thinking about. For me, what's imperiled is democracy, and so enacting in public, it is a known problem in academia that you can ask the wrong questions. Just generally, you can come up with data and not truth. And I would say that's the wrong question.
Yeah, I'm still very careful with where I get my money from. But,
me too. There's loads of people I wouldn't take money from. Yeah. My personal choice. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And there's not a right and a wrong answer.
Thinking about it when I attended a panel and there was a Kurdish fighter, and he said, no, the situation is we cannot make as good shoes as capitalism, so until then we can keep wearing capitalist shoes and do things on a smaller scale, like change things. I kind of agree with that, especially if that person says so. It's still the same, argument. Like, should we be using capitalism's resources?
Yeah, like I say, I think that's the wrong question. I just think it's the wrong question. We've been led to those questions in a lose-lose. That is a lose-lose scenario. There is nothing positive for artists in that narrative. And I encourage you to read Deleuze and Guattari, and anybody who's written since, to really read it and to drop the Marxism.
I'm not saying that I agree with what I said. I'm saying that
there's
I cannot avoid thinking about it.
Yeah, you can. Just stop right now. Read different people. Read different people. Understand what you're doing differently. Don't find disabling discourses, because that's a disabling discourse. Read something different.
I don't think you can ask the wrong questions. And it seems to me a fundamentally anti-Deleuzian approach to take. But I mean, I'm slightly worried.
I'm going to defend that. Well, let me defend that and then hold your other question. Right. When I'm talking democracy, democratically, each individual, I will embolden every individual to ask any questions they want to ask. All right, I don't have any problem in the democratic structure. In academia, in the pursuit of excellence and truth, there are wrong questions. How many angels are dancing on the head of a pin used to be an academic question pre-modernism, when in the medieval days. This is not a question. How many? I personally don't think that there is any truth merit in the idea of fairies, but there are loads of people, my sister included, who believe in them. Fairies and angels. I'm not going to tell her, even though I'm now on video, she won't watch it. I'm not going to tell her she's wrong. She's entitled to believe that, but there is no place for that in the university structure in the pursuit of truth. There just isn't. There are truths. It's when, some things are just not true. Trump was completely wrong when he said he got more people to his inauguration than Obama. There are just not truths. So
you're mixing up a conceptual truth with a statistical truth. I mean, there is only one cup in front of me.
Well, if you believe in multiverses.
The moment we start to conceptualize things, the kind of matrix of ideas that we're using is much more complicated. Now, so from the point you were making, it struck me that it looks like, and I know it isn't, because I know we've talked a lot, and so I don't mean this to sound as offensive as it might. It looks like quite a totalitarian position. And as you were talking, you were talking about people are able to be emboldened, but it struck me what happens. And I was thinking of queer theory as a good example. What happens if people embolden themselves to ask a question that actually might not fit into the paradigm that you're using? If you hold up that paradigm, and you've argued it very assertively and well, but if you hold up that paradigm, what happens to the possibility of dissent from outside? And that's what seems to me why I'm a great reader of Deleuze, and particularly Deleuze, less so Guattari, but because he does seem to offer that open, wholly rigorous, systematic way of thinking that gives people the opportunity to ask radically new questions, and that radical newness might be you might see that as a kind of proof of quality.
Yes, exactly. But you need to know you need to have parameters to know what is radically new. It doesn't emerge from a sludge. But you could determine
your own parameters. I don't need my parameters determined from me. When I think about my own intellectual history over the last 2 years, I thought I don't want to be an art historian anymore. So I thought I've got such profound worries about the parameters in which I'm working in. I wanted to rebuild those. The net result of that is I didn't get anything published for 2 years. And Grace was here a moment ago. She still did. Grace was hugely supportive in helping me get some work published in a magazine that another editor might have said, actually, go find somewhere else.
So 100%. I'm not saying the system we work in is always right. That the system, that the university system or the mechanisms for discerning truth is always right. Far from it. It is a consensus of individuals, and some people will be outliers. But also, we can see through Durkheim, at the very least, how paradigms shift. So it always takes people coming in with a radical suggestion. But like I say, there are always parameters to that. Otherwise, it's a sludge. I think your time frame is I'm talking sociologically and not on the individual level in a sense. And I'm seeing sociologically the place and role of universities and specialist knowledge in democracy.
I probably agree with that. You see, I don't think it's a sludge, I think it's a plane of imminence in Deleuzean terms, because you've got an open field in which to work, and its radical nature.
What I'm saying is, it is a plane of imminence. That is the world that we live in, okay? And this imminence, because of lots and lots of internalized neoliberal values, we are walking into demagoguery. We are walking into a totalitarian regime because difference is being erased.
Do you see that Deleuze? I mean, we don't want to kind of trade bibliographies, but just do you see that there's a possibility of a fascism in Deleuze's work?
I don't know what you would mean by that.
Well, it meant one thing that struck me. It seemed to be. He describes it as a work of ethics on the basis it's radically anti-fascist because you have this plane in which everything has a sort of a place. What struck me when I was thinking about Deleuze is that what you've actually got a bigger fascism in some ways. You've got a huge totality. So the actual possibility of dissent, although it's fundamental to his theory, actually you have to dissent within the terms of the field that he's listed.
Precisely.
So I was looking for a kind of form of post-Deleuzean thought.
Why?
Because it would challenge that. It would challenge my instincts about his limitations.
Oh, well, I'm saying that we have fields. I don't disagree that we have fields, and the totality of these fields of operation are what creates society, and we have individual responsibility in that. And just in a really obvious way, let's talk climate change. We all make choices in climate change, but the climate is doing what it's doing because of all of those choices that we're making consciously, unconsciously as societies, whatever. That is the plane of immanence. Things are happening irrespective of our individual choices and also because of our individual choices. Culture is no different. But we can take conscious responsibility for what we're doing in that and possibly therefore alter the direction of culture and of climate change. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Sure, I disagree with that.
And on that note, okay, yeah, that's unless there's any other burnings. It's hot and we're experiencing climate change in a lovely way, lovely sun and autumn leaves.
I hope this is a simple one. If I think I'm an artist, but your consensus people say that I'm not, where does that leave me?
So I understand, on an individual level, I say, are you engaging with other artists? That's all. That's it. Have a dialogue. So the hobby artist, and my mum is a hobby artist, the hobby artists aren't. They're engaging with the 19th century. You know, they might be in art classes, but they're going to look at Monet and they're like, oh yes, Cézanne. No, that's not artists. That's kind of painting historically. But whatever your educational, I'm not exclusive on the education thing at all. Art used to have no educational requirements. Like, to be an artist, you could be from any background. Now, increasingly, it's a university thing. But just speak to other contemporary artists, other living artists. Have that engagement. If you're working in the now, then you're a contemporary artist. All the time, the contemporary art world, that consensus changes. I have friends who have been... one of my arguments is that over history, the history of the Arts Council in England, the things that have not been funded are the people who are too commercial, like Jack Vetriano, for example, who hasn't been funded because that's not art, it's too commercial, and then suddenly he's shown in art galleries and he's fundable in that way. But also too political, has been funded and not funded. So the definition of art waxes and wanes, but I don't put the authority in the Arts Council. I just see how the funding resources are moved around. But I would say, to be an artist, you're part of that dialogue, then you're an artist. That's it. But if you're turning your back on the contemporary and you're playing around in the 19th century tropes, you're not an artist.
So did outsider art only become art with the museum and everything?
Outsider art only became art because of Dubuffet. It's an interesting, troubling category. And I work with the Bethlehem Gallery, artists in the Bethlehem Gallery. It's an interesting, troubling gallery, but some of the people in Bethlehem...
It's troubling you, but I'm not sure it's troubling many other people.
No, I know, but again, I think we're sleepwalking into real big problems. You know, yes, it does trouble me. I spend my life thinking about this, and I'm overly concerned with these things, perhaps, but that I am. But some of the artists in the Bethlehem project were artists before they were hospitalised, others weren't, and for me there's a problem in equating the two kinds of works that happen out of that. And I discussed that in Bethlehem as well. I will say this to those artists. Oh, more. Are you sure you don't want to leave? Look, we can just chat. Is it an open forum one? We can just chat.
I don't know. Yeah,
If it was late, we can have a beer.